I'm going to do a prayer of gratitude, and then we will go over a little review for all the new people. What is energy healing? And then we will dive into today's topic, which is our cosmic connection, and do mostly it's an hour and 15 minutes of energy healing work to support and enhance integration of our cosmic connection. So that should be interesting. And I, of course, as you guys know, I don't know exactly where the group is going to want to take this whole thing, but I'm here in a very feeling as if it's a huge privilege, and it's a huge honor for me to be here, to be the voice of the group, and to support the direction that everyone's divine being wants to move in order to support the highest and best possible outcome for today. So here's the prayer. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything and for being this healing webinar. Thank you for being the divine expression of each of us, humanity. Each one of us in this webinar is the manifestation of divinity, the intention of divinity to touch the relative, to connect, and to create and to be at this level. Thank you to our ancestors for the presence of our physical bodies, and with many blessings rolling through the ancestral archives. I'm just seeing that happening. Beautiful. Thank you to all the forms of consciousness responsible for the evolutionary process, for our ability to act as vessels or instruments of divine expression, for healing, for flow of knowledge and wisdom to the great eternal tradition of wisdom, for anchoring that position that supports and allows wisdom to always flow. Knowledge flows, knowingness becomes, knowingness flows from unmanifest to manifest. Thank you. Oh, and thank you for blessing our time to work efficiently and profoundly. We want to bring out the most salient points. We want to bring out the most powerful healings. And as a collective, the work that we do is as maximally beneficial for each individual here tonight, and also for the whole of humanity and beyond. Thank you. All right, so what is energy healing? Energy healing is the process of consciousness folding into the physical form. And when it does that, consciousness is basically folding into its own nature, because our physical bodies are an expression of consciousness. And our attention is consciousness in a very pure or very primordial form. So this primordial form of consciousness, which is awareness, folds into the physical form, which is like we could say very concentrated. It's consciousness that's rolled in on itself a lot of times in order to produce matter. And what that does is it brings the light of awareness to wherever a symptom is. So when we're talking energy healing, we're usually starting with a symptom of some kind. And awareness rolls into where that symptom is. And then the premise here is that consciousness or awareness has the ability to start with a symptom, which is a physical material effect, and follow it back to its source. Like, what's behind the symptom? What caused the symptom? Where is the seed of that symptom? And then what happens is consciousness addresses the seed. And so the nature of the relative is that it covers up those subtler, less manifest level of being. And so what we're doing in energy healing is we're like knowing that. And knowing it, we move past the surface covering and we get down to the more essential levels of the field or ocean of consciousness where the seed of the symptom resides. And then from that level, it's possible to leverage all kinds of effects to support the healing process. So what we're doing in these life healing webinars is you get to ask questions and stuff. Everybody gets a chance to talk and find out whatever you need in order to expand and stabilize your own ability to do this with maximum facility. So, and I'm being the voice of our collective. As a collective, even as I'm describing what energy healing is, already a lot of healing effects are starting. So I do my best in these energy healing webinars to describe what's actually going on, the healing that's actually taking place. We all have this huge potential to heal. The human body's, it's the nature of the human body to heal itself. But when awareness is clearly cognizant of the mechanics of that healing process, then all of a sudden it's enhanced. The healing process is enhanced, it's understood, we're in a position to actually apply intelligence to that process to help work out the details of the healing in a much more efficient and quickly, efficiently. I'm looking at a stabilization of energy in our group right now. So there's a stabilization, and the stabilization is taking place in the area kind of in the upper region of the heart Mahamarma. So there's this big energy center in the heart, and it's bigger than a chakra, right? So the heart Mahamarma, and up in this area, there's a stabilization taking place. Beautiful. And I'm seeing that's like a big gift for the ancestors, because the ancestors tend to be a little skittish about owning this knowledge, owning the taking responsibility for problems, and then owning the ability to find solutions, viable solutions that really work. It's not that the ancestors didn't want viable solutions. It's that there are centuries of habits of dealing with problems by not dealing with them. There's this illusion, which is, for some ancestors are clearing, but I think most of them have already gotten this. The illusion is it's easier to not deal with a problem. And the answer is that's true in the long run. Excuse me, in the short run. In the short run, it's way easier. A problem, I just won't deal with it. That's easy. And that can take care of you for a few minutes or something, for as long as you can get away with it. But in the long run, that's not a viable solution. And in the long run, it's not the most comfortable way to deal with a problem. So that illusion dissolving from the mental and emotional levels of the ancestors. And along with that, so much fear. And along with that, habits of giving away personal power to some other, anybody or anything else that's being defined as taking responsibility for that problem. Because if I decide not to deal with it, then I'm kind of like not taking responsibility, right? Oh, a problem showed up? Well, it's their fault. It's the fault of the situation. No, all that is quickly. It's happening very quickly. It's very quickly. And as that's happening, I'm actually seeing energy focus of attention or awareness in the back of the brain and going down the spine. And it looks to me as if there is some sort of restructuring taking place in the spine, which supports, for yourself and for the ancestors, it supports a physical form, our physical bodies, that are stable in owning our own personal power in a way never before. Much more primordial, much more solid. It's one thing to understand a principle, like, oh, well, I shouldn't hold this belief or something like that. But it's another thing to have it reflected directly into the physiology. And as that's happening, it's going like down the spine. Then I'm noticing the energy coming right back up and coming up into the sinuses and the face and the head area. So it goes down and then it comes right back up like that. And as that's happening, anything to do with the face area is associated with sense of self and identity, particularly as individuals, because we identify ourselves with our faces, right? That's how we recognize people. So that means a nice clearing of egoic, like small self identification, egoic structures for the ancestry, So anytime we're working with the ancestry, we're actually working with DNA. That energy flow that's opening up and moving into the face is able to bring resource and the resources of consciousness and original blueprints and forms of cosmic information to this area of the physiology, to the head, and particularly to this very large energy channel going down the cord of light, going down the middle of the body, and then coming back up like that. There's a lot of energy there. Everybody looks like you guys are all looking like a vessel of divine energy right now. It's very beautiful. And I'm asking to what degree, or I'm asking about the stabilization of that energy form and that clarity in the energy channels of the physiology. The most important area that's being modified by that energy flow is that area that's in the upper part of the heart, Mahamarma. And I'm noticing particularly in the back where we this is a little bit picking up where we left off in the last webinar, because there was a lot of great work that took place in the back of the heart, Mahamarma, at the last webinar. Everybody who's new here, who wasn't the last one, gets all that information and gets that download for that healing now. And so I'm experiencing a big releasing of, I would say, imbalances. Looks like some fear and anxiety. Looks like blockages in the circulatory system are being released, and these come down to actual physical blockages, which is great. And I'm seeing a lot of the fear and there's some very intense discordant feelings that are clearing up in the head, nose, sinus area as well. Congratulations, everybody. And along with that, there seems to be a kind of a flooding of very concise information coming right up into the deeper areas of the brain. And with that, specific information about regarding how to identify the DNA of invasive microorganisms. Yeah, good. It's good. It's good. It's like everybody knows it takes about 7 to 10 days to get over a cold, right? Well, it doesn't have to take 7 to 10 days. What takes 7 to 10 days is for the body to recognize the DNA of the invading virus and then produce the protein that kills the virus. And that process of recognizing the DNA of the invading virus can happen really, really quickly. But it does require an upgrade for the immune system. It requires an upgrade for the body's microbiome, because who recognizes the DNA of the virus? Your microbiome recognizes it. So, but that upgrade is being orchestrated by the inner area of the brain. That's what I'm seeing happening. So that's where the download is coming in, to the inner area of the brain, sort of deep brain structures. And a lot of that's really, really close to the sinuses. Like it's just right in back of the sinuses. It's almost as if the sinuses, see, you guys always take me places like I had no idea. So turns out that when we're in the presence of a virus, the sinuses are one of the first places that the body experiences exposure to that virus. And so the skill set to recognize a virus immediately and to understand where to look in order to extract the DNA information from the virus is just right up there behind the sinuses. That's so interesting. So the thing is, when any part of the body starts to, like awareness or attention goes in there and starts to really focus in on a particular part of the body, it does it because that part of the body is ready to upgrade to its next level of perfect expression of divine intention. Or we could say, binding the boundless infinity of consciousness in the physical form. So that upgrade for the sinuses and then the area of the brain right behind the sinuses, what's happening is that area, now it's full of awareness, right, and attention. It folds back into silence. It folds back into the transcendent. And transcendental consciousness, yes, a single, like an individual isolated part of the physiology can transcend when the rest of the physiology is not transcending. You can do that. Just letting everybody know that that's one of the options. That's like part of the potential of the human body. You're like, your stomach could transcend, or your gallbladder could transcend. Any part can transcend. And when I say transcend, I mean experience the silence of being directly. So that area that just got the download, it's like it offers back to the silence of being. It's like it bows down to the source of creation in gratitude for receiving the download, right? And what that does is it rolls the download, it rolls the information, the cosmic information coming in out to infinity, because the source of creation is infinite. It is unbounded. It is eternal. So anything that's stabilized in that area, even for a moment, has the opportunity to spin out to infinity. And that helps integrate and stabilize the download. Nice job, everybody. So how does this relate to our cosmic connection? Oh, good question. Because I didn't even know we were going to do that healing. But anyway, as you know, I spend a lot of time thinking about the topic of each webinar. And what I realized about the cosmic connection is that we're used to identifying ourselves with our physiologies and with all the trappings that come along with the physiologies, like habits and belief systems, as well as intellect and ego and perception and all the bits and pieces that come along with being a point of reference for the entire universe. But the whole universe is also our physiology. And if we follow consciousness back to its finest level of expression, you notice I use the word expression. So that means manifest consciousness, but the finest manifest consciousness. We find that the consciousness becomes very expanded and very spread out. Lots of people have heard me talk about the causal body. That's what I call that finest level of feeling, deepest level of consciousness. And at that level, consciousness is as big as the universe, and it's completely unbound by space and time. So it's also eternal. And at that level, if we had a physical correlate to that level of our consciousness, it would be the whole universe. It would be the body of the universe, essentially. You are the universe. So I'm looking at this cosmic level. Now, let's see. Let me just organize my thoughts for a second. I remember the point when I started experiencing that always as a part of the nature of the being. And it was activated by doing some gem light therapy. So anybody who hasn't done that, I recommend. It's very nice. Gem light therapy. where light is shined through like little flashlights that have gems in the ends. And so the structure of the gem affects the light and creates a kind of a fractal effect with the light, which is then beamed into different parts of the body. It's a very nice therapy. Just throwing that out there. But at the time, I remember I was working with a blue sapphire. And blue sapphire is for Saturn. And when the blue sapphire light shined into my body, I felt as if I could see the whole universe, and that it was extremely intimate and was myself. And after that, it didn't go away. That experience didn't go away. So I was thinking, well, I would like to recreate that experience. It would be nice if our healing collective could recreate that experience for everybody here, right? That we could actually stabilize that awareness of cosmic self, cosmic reality as an all-time reality for everybody. So I was kind of like questioning, dropping the question into the silence of being, right? Like, well, how would we do that? And lots of great answers came back. And one of them was, first, it's good for everybody to have a download for what is the energy signature of the cosmic self, of that great unbounded eternal aspect of self. Besides the fact that the whole Akashic record is there, all the memories of everything your soul has ever done since the beginning of creation, we're clearing fear of knowing that, and also fear of accepting one's like weaknesses, foibles, flaws, all that stuff, because we've all done everything. And if we're going to be transparent to ourselves, then we need to be accepting enough that everybody's made mistakes and everybody's experienced through the memories of the self. We've experienced all the different happinesses and sufferings. There's a template. Okay, so one of the values of having access to cosmic self is that lots of mystical information is available in the cosmos. I love that we're doing this at this time of year, right? Where we've got our Pacific Rim people who are below the equator experiencing lots of like rich sun energy and very bright, very exposing, like it makes everything transparent and it shows you in the sun, you see everything. And so it's showing us everything. Whereas here on the Northern Hemisphere, we've got all this bathing in starlight is what we're doing right now. And the starlight brings in information that's normally hidden because it's in the darkness, right? If we look out into the night sky, it looks basically dark with the specklings of stars, but all the cosmic templates, all the Akashic record, all the locations in creation where we have access to blueprints and vast archives of cosmic information, all of these are accessible through our cosmic connection, basically. So the value of opening up the cosmic connection is having access to resources which we did not previously have. And we all know, looking at the way things are rolling right now on Earth, that fair access to resources and opportunities is like the bottom line for people to be able to evolve and for countries to be able to raise themselves out of difficulties and so forth. So as we are opening up this field of cosmic resource for ourselves, we're actually creating an effect that's going out into the web of life and is supporting a more balanced access to resources for everybody. In other words, it's like there's a path to accessing resources. And we can look at this from many different dimensions, right? You can look at from a small dimension to a big dimension, but it feels comfortable thinking about it in terms of our Earth population, and that's not the only way we can look at it. As we open up our own access to cosmic resources, we are creating a sort of blueprint within our healing collective, which speaks to the web of life and shows, it's like forging a path where there wasn't a path before, like a pioneer, right? It shows, how do you get from feeling like you have no resources to being fully integrated and fully stabilized in access to all resource. So what that means is there's a connection between what we're doing individually and what's happening collectively. And because of that connection, there's actually an increased opening of our cosmic connection. As our consciousness is folding back onto its own nature, we are producing an effect that benefits the collective. And by doing so, we're actually opening a deeper cosmic connection in ourselves to the web of life. Because essentially what we're doing is we're creating a gift for the collective of humanity. And anytime we do something like that, it reflects back on us. It washes away some boundary that was produced by some karma, negative karma. By the way, I'll be taking questions at the end, just letting everybody know. So what's happening now is that folding back, that loop of consciousness folding back on itself to make a change in the field of our own consciousness, which then reflects out into the collective and makes a change in the collective and then reflects back again. That whole process, that whole loop is being offered into the field of absolute silence. And I just want to acknowledge how much I appreciate everybody's beautiful ability to fold their consciousness back into the field of silence and support that process. And gratitude rolls. Gratitude rolls. And the gratitude has this incredible softening effect. I'm seeing it as gratitude, but I'm also seeing it, it's being carried on waves of energy produced by the causal body, that big universal body, right? Whoops, excuse me. I got just a little bit too frisky there and knocked off the microphone. Okay. Thank you for understanding. We have to have like a comedy break every once in a while, right? It gets a little bit intense there. Anyway, yeah, the gratitude, it's rolling with this really, really soft light medicine. I call it a light medicine, but basically it's like a resonance produced by the causal body, produced by that sort of ocean-like, that big field-like level of consciousness, which is sitting at the finest level of feeling. It's very, very sweet. And I'm appreciating it because it's reflecting something that I was looking at earlier as I was examining all the different directions that this webinar could take. And so this is like nature's way of saying, go this direction. And that is that there's, when I started noticing that the presence of the universe seemed to be ever with me, what I realized is that it doesn't have this sort of awful, scary, terrible, fierce, like run away and hide kind of quality to it. Instead, that the overarching energy in the cosmos is this lovely adorableness. I realized that what understanding or feeling close to the cosmic reality actually allows us to appreciate ourselves more. because, you know, we all, as individuals, we tend to be a little critical or having high expectations or liking to push ourselves one way or another. But in the end, people really, all of us, our physical bodies, all of us are very adorable. We're made of adorableness. We really are. and I would say probably the most primordial level of our cosmic connection comes through our physiologies, because our bodies are literally made of star stuff. Our bodies are super smart, but they're also so completely integrated with the rest of the universe, because they're made of the same material as everything else in the universe, that our bodies know at a very sort of primordial level exactly, for example, exactly what the space that the sun and the earth are moving through right now feels like. I mean, it's not something that we tend to talk to ourselves about very much, but it's actually there. And if we think back, like say 100 years or 150 years or 200 years, we'll notice that there were certain beautiful expressions of culture which were different from the ones that we have now. There were expressions of divine intelligence. There have always been wise people, and there have always been like really beautiful hearted people who, and great artists and musicians who were able to look into the finest levels of consciousness and find a way to give expression to what was happening at the finest level of creation and bring that out to the surface. And then the collective consciousness would go, oh, that resonates with me. Yeah, I get that. You know, I get that. The arts and crafts movement. Remember that? Gosh, that was such a fun time in art history. Lots of different beautiful times that we've been through. And yeah, just go up a little bit. How's that? Just a little brighter. Okay. Yeah, so that's not the artistic orientation right now, but it doesn't matter, because what we have now, the particular concepts and aesthetics that we have now that are really beautiful, that really touch people's hearts, are the ones that give best expression to the quality of time and space that we're moving through right now as a collective. So my point is that we do know, and everybody knows, whether you're a great artist or you feel confident in bringing forth those expressions of being or not, we all know that we're part of this big soup. So we want to use that level of knowingness, which is inherent in the physical form. That's why it's so cool to be human, right? It's one of the reasons why we're so lucky that we have physical bodies right now, because we have this vessel, which is by its own nature inherently wise and gives us a cosmic connection, provides a point of reference for us in the universe. Otherwise, without the body, we'd be like all just sort of spread out, kind of like all over the place. But with the body, it kind of helps us focus in on that point. And it also acts as like a little magnet to bring in the specific information about what's going on, what's going down. So this provides a context for the ancestors particularly, but for some people, I would say also past lives. We're clearing away a lot of old belief patterns and assumptions about the body and about oneself, which were not flattering or not true, or limiting in our ability to leverage the incredible access that the human body has to cosmic information. Okay, this is good. So I'm seeing this, first thing's happening is some clearing going on, some clearing of these assumptions and beliefs and stuff like that. And when we're working with ancestors, we're working with DNA. So that means it's clearing for our physical bodies all the way down to the molecules, all the way down to the atoms, We're clearing out those beliefs for the body. And what that's doing is the result is an upgrade for cellular intelligence. That's what it looks like to me. I'm just sort of, you know what I'm doing. I'm standing here looking out into the field to everybody who's connected in their computers everywhere and all the dear people who are here in person, and taking energy reads at every point on what's going on. And then I have to filter, do a little bit of filtering to let you know the most important points, because there's a lot going on. But upgrade cellular intelligence. Upgrade in cellular intelligence means the cell's awakening. And I've been noticing for a while that like everything is awakening, right? The animals are awakening, and the rocks are awakening, and the stars are awakening, and the clouds, the air, all beings of all various types and varieties of physiologies, whether the physiology is made of air or fire or space or water, everything is waking up. The cells are awakening. And one of the things I'm noticing as this is happening is a very kind of very fine little increase of heat in the cells. It's as if the Agni, which is the fire, it's like a primordial fire. We can think of it as the first fire, right? That we can think of it as the fire at the beginning of creation. We can also think of it as that friction between infinity folding in on its own nature. It keeps folding in on its own nature. And as it does that, it creates like a little friction in there. And for the cells, there's a balancing, looks like a balancing of Agni in the cells. Okay, that's great for everybody, because what that means is improved metabolic process, starting at a cellular level in the physiology. So that's good, because that's the point in the digestive process, we could say, where the rubber meets the road regarding our ability to utilize our resources. So you can see, I'm seeing, and you're seeing all at the same time, how we started out with the healing that increased access to resources, right? And for ourselves and for the collective. And now the next thing that's happening is this upgrade for our physiologies, where our cells are able to utilize the resources more efficiently. So what do the cells do with the resources that come in from the food? Is the cells make energy. Makes energy. Restructures adenosine triphosphate in the cells, which are like the little, I can't think of the word right now. Batteries, that's it, kind of like batteries. Mitochondria are like the batteries of the cell, right? But in the mitochondria, that's where the food stuff gets turned into energy. And when that happens, it's coming in as a download. So it's good for us to understand this. Integration occurs. There's an integration. The production of adenosine triphosphate is basically an integrative process. So recognizing that, what's happening, our awareness is moving to the point, now awareness is moving from the cells, right? Now it's moving into the qualitative integration. And as we put our attention on integration, what happens is integration, being more of an abstract concept, starts to activate at a really fine level of the physiology, a very deep or primordial level, that finest feeling level of the physiology, the causal level. And so integration, discriminative integration. So not just in general, everything connects with everything, but instead it's a kind of very specified integration. So integration, activating at the finest level, feeling the causal level. So it's, when I say it integrates, what I mean is that whole causal body, which is kind of like a big ocean, starts to hum or resonate in the mode of that particular quality, in this case, integration. As the integration, humming at the deepest level of feeling, starts to affect the denser levels of the physiology, what happens is it comes up then to like the astral level, the physiology. And for those of you who are or may not be familiar with like the bubble diagram, I use my fingers to be the bubble diagram. There's a big bubble up there and there's a little bubble down there. But we have the field of pure unmanifest being. And this is just a navigational tool. I'm giving you a tool to navigate the ocean of consciousness, okay? We can look at consciousness as a spectrum of complementary pairs of opposites, right? So at one end, we've got dense, solid material, and at the other end, we've got very abstract, less concrete, and then all of a sudden, non-manifest level. And so the non-manifest level is where everything keeps folding back. When consciousness folds back, it folds back into the unmanifest. But then out of the unmanifest come different qualities. And whoops, as the causal body starts to resonate in the quality of integration, what happens is that integration starts to move up into the denser levels of the physiology. And as it comes up to the next level, which is the astral level, where we find the web of life and our world consciousness starts taking on the form of all these threads or strings or strands or streams of consciousness that connect everything to everything. Meridians from very, 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 very tiny, like little nadis, and down to microscopically tiny up to big as the universe, and connecting galaxies. Threads of consciousness at that level. At that level, there's a lot of discrimination. Because that level of consciousness is like the scaffolding upon which all the manifest levels are sitting. So it's a kind of, at that point, we really start to get something that's kind of solid upon which we can define boundaries and limitations. The boundaries and limitations seen at the relative level of creation can be traced back to that astral level where all those threads are. So in there, it's like I'm folding back into the field of being, right? And I'm going, we need to look deep into that level. Like, what are we looking at there that's important, particularly with regards to our theme, our overarching theme of today's session, which is the cosmic connection. At that astral level of the physiology, we still experience ourselves as the whole universe. It's still a big universe of threads of creation. And they all belong to wherever the awareness, at that level, it's outside space-time. So wherever the awareness goes, it's like, then we just own that. And that quality of adorableness, it's sort of woven through that whole field. So wherever we look, we find some aspect of consciousness that reflects what we really are in our essential nature, which is divine being. Divine being integrating into the relative. So taking a nice deep dive into this astral level, because I would like to look at this discrimination. I think it's important. It's coming up because it's important. Okay, so the astral level is where we connect up with all of our collective forms, like the collective of our ancestry, for example, or when we are doing healings for past incarnations or past experiences, we follow one of those little awareness, kind of jumps on a little thread and follows it back into that past period or that past experience. And thanks to these threads of consciousness, we can travel anywhere. But as I mentioned, they go from very tiny to very big. So we can see already that there's kind of like a hierarchy. There's a bit of a hierarchy of these threads, right? And it brings up something that, you guys, when I'm planning these webinars, I can only plan so much because I know that it's our collective that's going to bring forth really deep, profound knowledge. So I'll go in and look at something and then I'll think, Dorothy can only explore so far in that thing without the value or the presence or the blessing of our larger manifest self with all of us here together. So one of the things I was looking at was our relationship with within the context of our ancestral archive. And the reason is that, first of all, so much of what we know to be ourselves comes from our ancestors, right? Not only does our body come from our ancestors, but the way we think about things and the way we process experiences and our beliefs and like just so much comes from that. It's very important aspect of self. And so I was looking at that and I was thinking, the individual who's alive in their physical body has to be kind of like a wise monarch, we could say, because speaking of dominance hierarchies, it has to be like a wise monarch, because we are owning the structure of our ancestors in our bodies. Their DNA, their combinations are right here. So what we do with our bodies, what we do with that influences or affects the ancestors in ways that are more, I would say, concrete and powerful than we have given ourselves credit. This is important because, sometimes we hear like, oh, I have this particular quality that I don't like, but it's genetic because my parents had it and their parents had it and their parents had it. So there's really nothing I can do about it. And the reality is that it goes both ways. We do inherit, we plan to come into this world inheriting particular, among other things, life lessons from our ancestors, but also our DNA is this organic structure which is affected by our consciousness, right? So as we're doing ancestral work, we're actually changing, we're modifying, we're cleaning up the DNA. And it's especially important to be cleaning up these areas where the DNA has been shut down over the course of centuries by protein clusters called morphogroups. It's very valuable. This is the time that we can do this. Energy healing has a way of doing this, whereas in previous generations, it was not felt to be possible. No one even ever considered it. Just didn't enter the thought field at all. So remember in a previous webinar, we were talking about blind spots. Blind spots correlate with the areas of our DNA that have been shut down or shut off by morphogroups. Those are the protein clusters, morphogroups. And they're produced usually in young children whose parents are under stress. But once they have been produced by the child's physiology, the child carries that morphogroup in their DNA and passes it to the next generation, next generation, next generation. Okay, so where the DNA has been shut off correlates with the blind spots. That means areas where we are not in the habit, our consciousness isn't in the habit of being awake to its own nature. However, thanks to our cosmic connection, all the information in the blind spot is accessible. So the way we undo the blind spots is first find the form of the DNA, the whole form, the whole package of information in the cosmic archives where blueprints reside. And from there, we can compare and contrast with our own field of consciousness and our own DNA blueprint, and we can identify those spots where the morphogroups have latched on and turned off the DNA. You know what I'm seeing for a lot of people? I'm doing it. As I'm saying it, I'm doing it, right? What I'm seeing for a lot of people is those spots are connected to and associated with the ability to self-love. And it's not uncommon. I mean, in a way, just seeing that, it makes sense to me because, sorry, it's on my foot. Gives you a chance to see that cool mountain back there. Anyway, it makes sense to me because when a child's parents are under stress, like say it's a war situation or I don't know, some situation where the parents are unable to be fully present for the child and where they're dealing with their own problems, thus causing the child's body to pick up these morphogroups, to produce these morphogroups. In almost every case, what happens is the child feels as if somehow maybe they did something wrong. You know, like if the parents divorce when the child is very young, or the child loses a parent when they're very young, or the parents are under so much stress that they're not able to attend to the child when the child is very young. Any of these situations are great examples of situations that would cause a physical body to produce morphogroups. And so what happens is the child chooses, right? Every soul chooses when it comes into this world, like I'm going to have this particular set of parents. I'm going to come in this particular country in the world at this particular epoch in time. And I know there's going to be a war on. So I'm here and I'm ready to face that reality. But we do it because opening the path for the divine to express itself fully as in a human form involves self-sufficient ability to provide resources. We need to provide resources. And I know it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like a little child should have to provide all their resources. But if you've made it to adulthood, which I'm assuming everybody here has now made it to adulthood for the most part, except for any little kids that are over there listening. So most of us, yeah, right? that we made it through that. We made it through. We made it through with enough resources that we made it to adulthood. So congratulations, everybody. So this quality of adorableness, which connects us, literally connects us with the cosmos, part of the awakening in the cells, is the cell's ability to fold their own resources back into their own nature and feel beloved. The cells can self-nurture. Good, everybody, good, good. So as that is happening, several things are happening at once. The divine presence of being in the body is able to reach out into the past for yourself as a small person, and then also for the ancestral line, and not only clear the morphogroups in this physiology, in your physiology, but go back and clear them for the ancestors. It's sort of like epigenetic manipulation backwards. But that's okay, right? If it can happen forwards, it can happen backwards. And if there's anything that we can conceive with our consciousness, then it also can be done. So that's the first thing. And at each point, as consciousness is folding back through time, back through space-time, to provide the energy frequency that dissolves the morphogroups, the signature of that light medicine, the signature of the consciousness that's able to do that, is one that recognizes one's essential nature as deeply precious, deeply adorable. You know, children come to this world to love their parents and to provide a perspective of love to their parents that the parents would not have otherwise had. So it's less important, the love that you got from your parents, than the love that you gave to your parents. And that I'm saying that to you, but I'm also saying it, we're going back and saying it to the previous generations who clearly all made it to adulthood, right? So It's the love that you give to your parents, because we have to think about whatever we do, how it affects ourselves. There. So lots of forgiveness, lots of understanding, lots of recognition. One of the things that people didn't get was the recognition. Recognition itself is what happens when consciousness folds into its own nature, right? Because if there's no awareness, then there's no recognition. But when consciousness starts folding into some area of the physiology or some area of its own ocean of self or whatever, recognition occurs. And recognition is the awakening of being. It is the awakening of being. So what that means is that divinity is awakening to its own nature. Every time we move our attention onto any part of ourselves, any part of the system of the physiology or the family or the subtle levels of the physiology or of the being. All right. I promised I'd take questions. I think some questions have come in. Now I've got this new light. You guys can't see it, but it's like, I don't know, it's like, here's this crazy light thing. It's like this round light thing. It's supposed to be better than my other lights. I don't know. Anyway, but the thing is, it covers up the question box. Just throwing that out there. So I want to get to people's questions. So please forgive me. I'm going to have to manipulate my screen around just a little bit so I can do this. Okay. Oh, so one of the participants is saying that this particular download started for her like a week ago yesterday. Yeah. Okay, I love that you mentioned that, because guess what? It started for me too around then, because you know me, as soon as the previous webinar finishes, I start thinking about the next one. So all this stuff starts rolling and flowing, but I never know what it's going to look like until we get together as a collective. And then when we're here together, everyone's consciousness kind of adds in, and it allows it to come out to the surface so we can see what the heck we're doing. So, okay. Then on Saturday, I had this strong urge to wear gold. What does the gold have to do with the healing? Okay, good question. So the deal with gold is that gold represents the quality of the sun. So, and the sun is first of all, the sun is kind of like the royal organized, you could say, the administrator of our solar system, in a sense. So the gold connects you to that aspect of yourself, which is sort of like in charge. It's at the head, or at the control center of everything that's happening. So that's one thing about the gold. And it makes sense because the healing, which is opening up the resources, cosmic resources, so that they're ever present. And oh, other people raising hands, nice. That brings with it greater responsibility as well, right? Because if you have access to more resources, then you have to, it's like earlier when things are becoming very transparent, right? It's like, well, I just have to accept myself. I have to accept everything just the way it is. So the other thing about gold is that people wear it in order to increase wealth and health, because the sun is also the server, or the giver of both wealth and health. So it's warm, right? It has kind of a warm nature, and it's related to that Agni. Agni, when it's balanced, it's beautiful that we have this balance of the Agni in the fire, the primordial fire in the cells of the body, because that healing alone is major for supporting really excellent health for everyone. So anyway, thank you for the experience and the question. I appreciate it. Okay, more questions coming in over here. Audio is okay. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, so here's another thing. So from California, the question came in, the trees need some help right now. And could we do a healing for the trees? And this question comes in from Northern California, where there've been a lot of fires. And so you can imagine how traumatic that is for the trees. But also it's an area that at this time of year tends to be very dry in Northern California, and that's why the fires come on. Thank you for asking about the trees. So I'm looking at the trees. And the first thing that I'm seeing is we are not their only caretakers. Obviously, and this kind of gets into, is a little bit related to the concept of the hierarchy, which I didn't talk much about tonight at all, by the way. That and all this mystical knowledge that's available in the cosmos. So those topics we may have some fun with tomorrow. But the Earth Devas are responsible to a large degree for taking care of the trees. And they access the trees through the roots. So in order for us to, as a collective, to promote a healing that would help the trees, it's necessary for us to work in tandem with Earth's energies, which are responsible for the trees. Now, you've heard me say many times that all these subtle beings are not separate from us at all, but they are really modes of our own causal physiologies. So the causal body hums in the mode of Earth Devas, right? And then we feel, oh yeah, that Earth Deva energy, right? But it's just coming from within. It's all being, it's all consciousness. So. But it gives us a chance to access that aspect of our own intelligence, which, by the way, happens to be the type of intelligence that gets covered up by morpho groups, right? How many little kids live in a world where they are fully aware of Earth Devas and all kinds of things, and then somewhere along the line some stress creeps in and all of a sudden they get to be 4 or 5 and they don't remember any of that stuff anymore. They're just concerned about, hanging out with their friends and getting ready for puberty and grown-up stuff like that. So what happens? Not so long ago, there was a big fire in Lockridge and a house burned down. And the newspaper ran an article about the house that burned down. And it turns out that the man who originally built the house was a Swedish man whose name, a couple generations back, whose name was Lily Spear. And I read that, and that name popped right off the page to me. Lily Spear. Who has a name like Lily Spear? Well, fairies have names like Lily Spear, right? That's definitely a fairy name. If that's definitely a Davic name. And I realized, even back 100, 150 years ago, people were just a little bit more in touch with that level of nature's intelligence than we are today. So we don't notice over the course, so it's not just from little childhood up into adulthood, but also through the course of time. There are periods I was looking, this beautiful woman who lives on Jersey Island, which is in the middle of the English, it's not in the middle, but it's in the English Channel between England and France. And so I met with her, and so she said she lived there. So I thought, oh, I'll go look at Jersey Island. Well, I was reading about Jersey Island, and there's this chapel that was built there. And the chapel was originally built in another part of the island. It was attempted to be built in the 1300s in one part of the island. And at night, when the workmen were sleeping, the fairies would come and get the rocks and move them to another part of the island. And so it became evident to the people who were building this chapel or this holy space that they weren't supposed to build on that spot because the Earth Devas didn't like it. And at that time, there was enough of a kind of a coordination, like a recognition and a coordination and an awareness that we live in this world with these other beings. There was enough of that people respected it. And so they just, after a few nights of that silly business, they just said, okay, we're going to build our chapel somewhere else. And they just built it in the place over by the sea where the rocks were being carried at night. Yeah, what person would bother getting up in the middle of the night and carrying a bunch of big old, no, that takes many people to do that. So one of the things we're accomplishing through our work, and like here, focusing on the trees, is reawakening these parts of our inner intelligence and our DNA that remember our connection, our cosmic connection to the intelligences of our universe. And the beauty is, as we're just, as a collective, I can feel it, we're turning our attention to these earth energies, earth devas, these lovely custodians of the trees. What that does is it awakens that aspect of our own consciousness and our physiologies. And immediately as that happens, our cells are like, oh yeah, we're awake, we're offering this back into silence to stabilize it, right? And to roll it out to infinity at the same time. And at the same time, the earth intelligence deeply, deeply appreciates our attention and our desire to support this process. Earth intelligence has been attempting to uphold and carry all of this energy, because by itself, without human support, all this time. And so that's been a bit of a trial, because humans bring a different type of perspective to this work, different from the Earth Devas. Plus, we can manipulate stuff at the relative material level of creation, right? So we can do things to help different from what the Devas do. We can plant the tree in the ground, but then the Devas will come and love it and nurture it and help it, encourage some worms to come over. Worms don't like to listen to us humans, but they'll listen to the Earth Devas. I tried talking to the worms, they just won't listen to me. I'm just kidding. I try to be good to the worms in my garden. They're important. They're important friends. Anyway, so I'm just feeling that. And again, I'm feeling the transformation primarily in the upper part of the body. That, remember at the beginning of today's session, there was that channel of light that went down into the pelvic floor and then it comes back up again like that. And I'm feeling that area very activated. So this must be some sort of internal energy structure in the body, which I guess I was not previously aware of. Thank you to all of you for helping with your consciousness, for waking up our understandings and experiences of ourselves. But there's some kind of form that, if you imagine the human body, it kind of, as the energy comes up through the body, through the center of the body, it kind of like fans out as it comes up higher in the body. It fans out to the crown of the head, but there's also a fanning that takes place just above the heart area, in the shoulder area. And that area is awakening, it's waking up. And this whole area, for me, I understand it to be the area where we hold responsibility. So what that means is it's nice to have a little bit deeper connection to the earth devas and the intelligence of the earth, but it's also a responsibility. And there are codes of behavior which we as humans have forgotten over the course of time, because we've been out of touch with these levels of our neighbors, the earth devas. So what's happening is our collective is offering a request for a download for the information to allow us to work with the Devic intelligence of Earth in the most dignified, appropriate, honorable manner, the safest way to do that. And for that, we draw upon the great archives of wisdom that are in the cosmos. I'm just looking at it unfolding, because these same intelligences that helped. I'm glad I have this picture behind me, because, I mean, talk about Earth Devas, right? Isn't that just amazing that Earth Devas create these fabulous forms that the same intelligences that create these beautiful stones behind us are active throughout the entire universe, creating all kinds of forms on all kinds of planets, all kinds of stars, all kinds of cosmic structures. In the center of the body, there is a stabilization of the energy, required the energy signature, which allows our bodies to be kind of like a magnet to draw in the specific information regarding appropriate interface with Earth Devas. One of the first things I'm seeing is that they work at a very delicate level, and one of the pieces of information coming in is of utmost importance to them is that we don't go in like a bull in a china shop to, to try to do some work and with good intentions, right? But like not knowing. So when it comes to certain types of healing, for example, healing for the trees, we need to be willing to follow the lead of those who have already been custodians of the trees and the stones and everything for a really long time. That actually is a beautiful place for us because it allows us to kind of shadow those who have or apprentice with, kind of, right? If we could think of it that way, with those who know their stuff really, really well. And it requires increased refinement of perception in order to catch like the details, in order to catch the nuances of the work that's being performed at that level of creation. So this refinement of perception is founded upon the increased intelligence in the cells of the body. There's a type of systemic perception. This is a download coming right now. Oh, we've got raised hands in California. Yeah, there's a type of perception that's like synesthetic perception, which is above and beyond the senses, the gross senses of perception, where perception is experienced as a whole body effect, kind of. And it's not isolated into one of the 5 channels. We could say perception of knowingness, the sense of knowingness, perception that comes in of just knowing, deep, deep knowing. Deep knowing, and that's why that inner channel is wide awake right now and is clearing and stabilizing. There's a lot of stuff happening in this sort of this fanned out upper area of the body. I would say it's like the upper part of the inner channel of the astral body. So that channel of the astral body is itself a cosmic form. It's a cosmic intelligence. It's a naga. So the naga is receiving a healing as well. That's like this ancient flow of energy that brings life force into the body. Those who aren't sure, check my knowledge base, because I've got some nice pages on there for things like Mahamarmas and Nagas and other terms which may or may not be familiar to you. And each page ideally ultimately has a description, a video, and a healing for that particular part of the physiology. That's a work in progress. But I see that we've come to our time. So we have to end here today. And we didn't really go into a lot of detail of what we're going to do with and for the trees. But I feel actually that the healing itself is quite appropriate, because the work that we did do is work that requires a good night's sleep. More raised hands. Thank you for raising your hand, darling. It requires a night's sleep in order to bring ourselves up to a level where we can actually do that work really effectively. I got to close this one. I think also I'm kind of cut off from one of my question boxes. I just need to check. Oh. So the lady who had the experience with gold said she put her grandmother's wedding ring on. Sweet. Adorableness incarnate right there. Okay, my dear. So, yeah, we have to stop, but more questions. What we're going to do, I see a good question came in about morpho groups. So I will address more questions tomorrow morning for those of you who are on this subscription program. I hope to see you tomorrow morning, which is morning my time. For those of you who aren't, you will receive the recordings of both today's session and tomorrow's session. So don't worry, we try to get the recordings out as early in the weekend as we can, so you have the weekend to look at whichever session you might have missed. And because we really appreciate everybody's participation and engagement in this healing webinar. Really, as I've said many times, I can't do it without you. Each one of us adds our consciousness to the process, and it's so precious, so rich, the effect. So thank you all very much for today's session, and we'll go more deeply into the nature of mystical wisdom tomorrow, which is one area I didn't get to touch on so much tonight, and also maybe get some more information about the hierarchy of our own consciousness. All right, and of course, answer the question on morpho groups and do more work to heal the trees and everything. So thank you guys. It's been incredible to be with you. I feel like we could have gone another hour easily.